Also, I'm good like this, and this will compliment both of us, because my listeners were excited that you're coming on, and I'm very fortunate. One of my listeners is somebody that you know. He
Oh,
go, he goes by the name of Richard Fortus. Richard Fortus.
Richard is one of the greats.
Richard
I love
Fortus, of
I
course, from
love
Guns N'
him.
Roses. Yeah. He loves you too, man. He says, "Oh man, I let him know you're coming on." He says, "Oh man, Doug is one of my favorite players. I've learned so much from that guy. Such a monster. He was the first guy I thought of to replace me in Daisies, and I'm so happy he did it. He's taken the band to a new level. Please send him my regards." So
Oh,
here's a
that's
question,
awesome.
but I want to hear your response to that, because yeah, he
Well, he's
recommended you to Daisies.
yeah, he did. He you know, it it made sense because we're all friends, in the end it made sense, but Richard was the first one to bring me up, I guess, and I had been basically I was in your position a couple years later. I had a son that was 4 years old, and I was going through a breakup, and I needed to get off the road, and that's when I left Whitesnake, and I wanted to be with my boy. There's nothing like it's not for everybody, but for those of us who have kids, it's the best. And I was off the road. I did do a little bit of work with Glenn Hughes during a period of 2015, but um, Richard got injured in a motorcycle accident and said, "Hey, why don't you get Doug to fill in for me?" And I couldn't because I had committed to doing just two shows with Glenn, but it was in Japan, and I just didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to say I was committed and then say, "Oh, I got to offer to go with the Dead Daisies to fill in for Richard for a month."
Mhm.
So I turned it down, and then later they called me back, and I go, "Well, what about Richard?" And they said, "Well, Richard's the one that recommended you, and I can't say anything, but Richard's and Dizzy are going back to GNR, and we're going to make a new record, a new start, and kind of change up the sound a little bit since we're not going to have Dizzy. We're just going to go a little more guitar oriented or whatever." But Richard is a sweet person. He's just a good, kind person. There's nobody more kind that I've met in this business than Richard Fortus. He's a monster. I say before I met him, before I knew him, I saw him play with GNR, and there were three guys on stage playing guitar that night, and Richard was the guy that I walked away going, "Holy shit, this guy he's from another planet, what he's doing." And he's very humble, but he is a monster player. There's no doubt. He's doing what they want him to do, and they give him a little spot, I think, with GNR, but he's definitely who knows what he's going to do in the future. The sky's the limit for that guy. And another thing about Fisher, he's very, to back up the thing about him being kind is I talk to Richard about gear all the time, and he'd be like, he said something like, I found an old guitar I really want, and I'm going to sell some stuff and get it. And I go, "Wow, man, I really want one of those too." I've been looking. And he'd call me out of the blue and go, "Hey, I just was at a store and they got a guitar that you might be interested in. I'm thinking about it too." And I'd go into the store, and they'd be like, "Richard's kind of got first dibs, but if he doesn't want it, then maybe, if you want to take a crack." And that particular guitar, Richard ended up getting it. And I was like bummed about it, but at the same time, I was happy for him. And because it was really cool. He wasn't for sure what he was going to, which, if he was going to get it. And then, but out of that contact that Richard and I made, and there's been a few contacts with people with gear that Richard introduced me to them. Leo Scala, an amazing guitar builder, luthier that works with Richard, also made a guitar for me that's just incredible. But down the road, I got a call from that guy from the music store, and he goes, "Hey, Doug." And I go, "Hey, what's going on?" And it was a place called Chicago Music Exchange, and he goes, "Richard told us that you're still looking for a guitar, and we got this one here that you might be interested in." And I was like, "Well, does Richard want it?" And they said, no, Richard doesn't know about this one yet. He said that, if he told us a while ago you're looking for one. So if you want to check it out, I go, yeah, let me check it out. What is it? And they told me, and I was like, I want it. I bought it. And Richard wrote me and he goes, congratulations. I'm glad you got it. Because if you didn't take it, I was going to get it. Anyway, he's a great dude. I
I
love
love
him.
I love that. And he actually does have a question for you. So he's I guess co-host right now.
All right.
He's like, ask him why Satch didn't play on your album. He was surprised, as I know they are close. Satch was the one that suggested him to GNR. So is that Satriani suggested you to Guns N' Roses? But you got Vi, Guthrie, and Govin and Brian freaking May. That record is great. My favorite thing Ron has done. Uh, oh, I think never mind. I'm reading this. I'm reading a question he wants to Bumblefoot
For somebody else.
for somebody
Oh, okay.
else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is
Yeah, yeah.
hilarious. We'll see if I
Well,
want
I'll
to
tell
edit
you.
that in or not.
No, you could, but I'll tell you a funny story though, because I
Because
back
it's
in the
right next
day,
to his, it's right next to the say hey or whatever. Because I
you
was
can
talking
cut
to
this out
Fortus
too.
this morning.
You can cut this out too, but I'll tell you a funny story. Was that not funny because Joe back in the '90s, I had been working with Andy Johns, that the producer who's known for Zeppelin and Hendrix and a different bunch of stuff. He was an engineer for Hendrix. He engineered he co-produced some Zeppelin and Stones. He worked on, and he um, he was working with Satriani. He did the Extremist album, and just before the recording, Joe got all his gear stolen. And Andy called me and goes, hey, you got this one Marshall that I really need to borrow it because Joe's doing an album and all his gear's gone. And I went down and I met Joe and I thought, okay, I'm going to bring the amp and Joe's going to just start wailing, through it because it's a great amp. It's a great Marshall. In fact, that's that's it right there. That was the guitar amp on the Extremist, and I
Okay.
still have that amp. I bought that amp in 1981, but the first thing Joe did, he just hit a couple E chords, checking it. And he goes, "Great, I love it." And I'm like, "Where's the shred? What?" And he's like, "I can tell. It's fine. It's good." He's very quiet, very, very quiet dude. But yeah, he was. Years later, Joe asked me. He asked Uli Roth to join him on stage in France, and I was there. And he said, "Get Doug to jam with us too." I know Uli and had just met Joe a couple times, but um, they were like, we're gonna do Smoke in the Water, and but we don't have a singer, and I was like, I'll sing it, and so I ended. It's a really terrible vote. It's terrible, but yeah, it was just you know some fun run-ins with Satriani. So yeah, that question was for Ron.
Oh my
Sorry
God.
about that.
No, I'm sorry about that. That's so funny. I was like, the whole time I was like, I didn't see anything about a Doug solo album. Maybe I'm missing something. So yeah. That's
Well,
funny.
anytime that Joe wants to play on any album I'm on, he's welcome, and Richard too.
From the Richard comment, I can pick up from here to an actual fan question. So this is a fan question, GNR
Okay.
related. I got from Facebook from John. Were you ever considered? Speaking of it, you may have heard that Facebook little comment, a little ding right there. I don't know. Were you ever considered for a guitar spot during the Chinese democracy sessions?
I wasn't only by one guy, but because he called me and Dizzy called me. I had known Dizzy because Dizzy and I had a mutual friend, and Dizzy played on a solo record that I did way back in the '90s, and he played beautifully on it. It was so cool for him. But he called me and said, "Hey, we're looking for a guy to play like the Slash stuff, and we've got Richard Fortus, and we've got the guy from
Robin
from
Fink
Robin
from
from
from Nine Inch
Robin,
Nails.
yeah." And he goes, "We're looking for someone to do the more rock stuff." And I was literally sitting next to David Coverdale. We were just starting to work on the first Whitesnake record that we wrote together. And I go, Dizzy, I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful, but I'm right in the middle of doing an album with Whitesnake, and I co-wrote it, I'm co-producing it. And he goes, okay, man, are you sure? And I go, I mean, and I think Coverdale heard it. He's like, Doug, just tell him you're busy, or whatever. But yeah, that's as close as it came. Dizzy thought of me that I should come audition, and
And that's a
he
great
said,
story.
I think Axel would like you or whatever, and he's pretty picky about the people he's around. And, um, but I was super excited about what I was doing, and you never know where it might have led to. But I think that they got
Was that when I got Bumblefoot?
no. Oh, sorry. They had Bumblefoot. They had Bumblefoot.
I
That's
know
when they got Bumblefoot.
they've
Yeah.
had a lot of members over the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. I forget, but I remember Richard. They mentioned Richard was in the band, but and and Dizzy. So I forget who's playing bass. But
Tommy
anyways,
Stinson. I mean, I know
yeah,
all the
that's right.
members. I
That's
guess the
right.
timeline sometimes it's hard to keep up.